We are recording.
Recording now?
Correct.
Hello, my name is Don Wick, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Skagit County, I would like to welcome you to this candidate forum. I will serve as the moderator. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose candidates. We encourage the informed and active participation of all citizens. Membership is open to men and women of all ages, and we invite you to join us. We acknowledge the candidates joining us for this forum, and we appreciate those of you viewing this. We hope you will learn more about those who wish to represent us. Each candidate will be invited to do opening and closing statements of 2 minutes. Community submitted questions have been provided to candidates. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond. Time may prevent asking all the questions presented. Today, we welcome candidates for the office of State of Washington House of Representatives, District 39, positions 1 and 2. Washington's representatives in the House serve 2-year terms. In conjunction with the Senate, the House of Representatives meets in session each year to create new laws, change existing laws, and enact budgets for the state. I'd like to introduce the candidates running to represent Washington's 39th Legislative District, Position 1 in alphabetical order. They are Klaus Johns and Robert Sutherland. And the candidates running for Washington's 39th Legislative District, Position 2 in alphabetical order are Carolyn Eastlick and Ryan Johnson. Our timer will be tracking the time, which begins with green as it counts down, turns yellow when 15 seconds remain. When it turns red, time is up, so please stop talking. We ask that candidates be respectful of the time allowed. If you speak beyond the time limit, your microphone will be muted. We will begin with a 2-minute introductory statement from each candidate. Candidate Johns, would you please unmute yourself and begin with your opening statement? Again, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us to this forum. I'm speaking to you from the ancestral homes of the Sauk-Suiattle and the Upper Skagit tribe. Why I'm running for office is to represent the people who live and work in Eastern King, Skagit, and Snohomish counties, to create jobs, to support the will of the voters, to make our communities stronger and our families safer, to fight corruption and all forms of discrimination, and to preserve a strong and healthy economy. The biggest issue we're going to face this fall is our $4.4 billion projected budget shortfall. And we need to fix that without taxing working families or cutting jobs, education, unemployment, or healthcare. How will I address that? I support life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which requires a job and an income. I support creating a state public bank to create revenue and jobs. I support creating a high school skilled trade apprenticeship program to fill the 500,000 job vacancies to build affordable housing. According to Dr. Gerald Friedman's economic analysis, creating a public health trust could expand and improve coverage and still save the state more than $9 billion all by itself, which is twice the budget shortfall that we're facing. As far as raising taxes, I support a capital gains tax. But the median household income in Skagit County is only $55,000, and it's only $70,000 in Snohomish County. So we would not want to be raising taxes on those folks because they're already struggling. Washington State is our largest job creator with some 120,000 employees. So cutting the state budget would mean cutting more jobs. And we found out in 2008 that only prolongs a recession. Again, thank you to the Skagit County League of Women Voters for inviting me to participate in this forum. I greatly appreciate it. That's it.
Thank you so much. Candidate Sutherland, please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
All right, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a U.S. Air Force veteran, honorably discharged. I went to Gonzaga University where I earned my degree in biochemistry. Spent my career here in the Puget Sound researching DNA, developing cancer therapies. In 2018, the good voters of the 39th district elected me to represent them down in Olympia, and I spent the last 18 months or so doing just that. Democrats have been in control of Olympia for decades now, and we're seeing just how bad it can be when one party has control. It just doesn't work well. Businesses are closed, are relocating elsewhere like Boeing. We see rioting in our streets and basically general lawlessness occurring throughout our area. We have skyrocketing property taxes. Too many of our kids are not even allowed to attend school. Traffic congestion continues to worsen. All of this because of bad leadership by Democrats. It's time for voters, if they want to make a change, consider changing the party in Olympia. It's time for a change from Democrats to Republicans. Here in the 39th, we've got some great voters. Republicans are strong in this district. I'm asking for the voters to reach out to other districts and to go ahead and help the candidates in other districts who are struggling, other Republicans. If you want to see a reduction in traffic, crime, homelessness, if you want to see your property taxes come down, if you want to see some good things happen in our community, make our communities better and safer, then you must consider the change in leadership down in Olympia. Robert James Sutherland, Legislative District 39, State Representative, thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. Candidate Eastlick, please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Wick. I appreciate the time, and I need to correct you. My name is pronounced Eslick, at the soft E.
My apologies.
All right, you're forgiven. My name is Carolyn Eslick. I have been serving for 3 years down at the state legislature for the 39th district in position 2. Immediately when I was introduced to the position, I was given 3 wonderful committees. And at the moment, I had no idea how perfect they were for me. One was Transportation Committee, one was Capital Budget, and the third was Human Services and Early Learning. So transportation was a huge, and still is, near and dear to my heart because of the highways, Highway 9, Highway 2, that desperately need improvements, more capacity in both of them. So I carry that voice as I have lived on Highway 2 for over 30 years. My other committee, of course, the Capital Budget, I was very successful with my partners in bringing home many, many projects to our 39th district. And today we even had a groundbreaking with the new behavioral health building that's going to be raised, 16 beds in Sedro-Woolley. My other committee is Human Services and Early Learning. I'm also on Children's Mental Health. I was very instrumental in helping to pass House Bill 2883, which gave parents back their voice on children and youth between the age of 13 to 17, so that they had control over their mental, behavioral, and medical issues. So I plan to continue these as I get back into the swing of things in session. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn Eslick. Candidate Ryan Johnson, please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Johnson. I'm running against Carolyn Eslick. I'm a Navy veteran. I'm originally from the Chicago area. I stayed here when I got out in '99, which is a long time ago now. I was a jet mechanic in the Navy. I was a jet mechanic for 3 years when I got out, and I've been driving a truck ever since. I'm a Teamster, and my job gives me a very unique insight into the 39th as a whole. I am all over the 39th, not every day, but most days, in both ends of it, Skagit County and Snohomish County. And I deliver to homes and businesses, and I know that there are people who are watching this who will recognize me from delivering to them. I understand why people hate both parties and hate politics in general. I get it. You have a right to. Everybody says they want an average person in politics. Well, here I am. I understand what it's like to fear losing your job. In March, I went from being in the top third of seniority at my job one day to being at the very bottom the next. That's how many people we laid off. I understand what it's like to get a giant healthcare bill or to need daycare and not be able to find it. And when you can find it, how are you going to pay for it? I like to speak to issues in ways that people connect to their lives. I'm going to tell you why any legislator from any party who promises $30 tabs and they're going to cut your gas tax and build roads is flat out lying to you. I'm going to tell you why our school security policies are a joke and how we can fix many of them for literally free. I'm going to explain police accountability in ways that everybody can understand and connect with. I thank you guys for having me, and I'm looking forward to the debate tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for your opening statements. In this next session of the forum, we will move to the responses to questions which have been prepared by league members and provided to the candidates in advance. Each candidate will be asked to respond to the same question as they are called upon. Now for the first question, as a reminder, you each have 1.5 minutes for your answer. Carolyn Eslick, please unmute yourself and answer this question. Here's the first question. In your legislative role, please address training, transparency, and accountability for law enforcement personnel. You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Wick. I'd like to start a little history here. When I became mayor for the city of Sultan in 2009, excuse me, we had a police department that was completely out of control. They were spending $100,000 more every year than what they were budgeted. And so we negotiated very successfully and brought in the county sheriff's department. We just never looked back because it was the right thing to do at the right time. And it was about making sure that we had funding intact. I totally believe in funding our police and safety. That's number one in my book, as far as we don't even have a community unless we have the police in doing their job. I do believe that we need to have some changes and more community training, and that's why I always supported the social counselor that goes out with our police, and they started doing that in my city early on. We need more behavioral health and counseling that actually take charge when that actual happens in the field. So transparency is really important, and we absolutely have to have that in the police department too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidate Islick. Candidate Sutherland, same question to you. In your legislative role, please address training, transparency, and accountability for law enforcement personnel.
Yeah, in my role, my first session in Olympia in 2019, I'm on the Public Safety Committee, and that oversees law enforcement. And voters had passed initiative I-940, I believe it was, which wanted more accountability, more training, for law enforcement officers. And so there was a great divide between law enforcement and citizens, action committees and groups and citizens. And the initiative itself was well-meaning, but very poorly written as far as making it a law. And so we were instrumental in bringing all stakeholders, all parties, all interested parties to the table. And it took months, but in the end, everybody, the law enforcement organizations, the civic organizations, legislature, everyone came together, and if I'm not mistaken, the final bill on that was a 98-0. It was a unanimous decision. Everybody came together, worked hard, we hammered out the details, and we made our law enforcement community across the Washington state a better community. They're more accountable for interactions, violent interactions between law enforcement and civilians. There's better oversight from outside committees instead of just internal investigations. We hammered that out. It took a long time, but in the end, we have a good product that I can be proud of, and I'm sure law enforcement is as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Next question is to candidate Johnson. In your legislative role, please address training, transparency, and accountability for law enforcement personnel. You have 1.5 minutes.
This was a long time ago, but I was a former Navy base cop. And the military made it very clear. If you shoot somebody you are not supposed to, you are going to prison. I thought he had a gun and he didn't, means the officer will go to prison. The military builds in accountability immediately. And there's a reason there are no shootings on military bases, because they build the accountability in and make it very clear that you will be held accountable in ways you will not like. We need to end qualified immunity. Police, the law always assumes they're right, even when it's clearly shown they are not right. We need random drug testing, full panel drug testing for police, and this should be required with all use of force incidents and all shootings. We need body cams required on all police to be on at all times. Tampering with these should be an instant felony tried by a special prosecutor. Being found guilty means we remove your law license. We need telematics. We need to track every officer at all times in their vehicles. We need dash cams and cams all over their vehicles. We need to end racial profiling. We need to end civil asset forfeiture. We need to put the power of oversight back to the people. And body cams and dash cams are a great start. Thank you.
Thank you. Klaus Johns, same question. In your legislative role, please address training, transparency, and accountability for law enforcement personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Wick. The average public school teacher spends more than 1,200 hours a year for 4 years training, whereas the average police officer receives only about 900 hours of training, and that's less than 1 year. The probationary period for a public school teacher in Washington State is 3 years. The probationary period for most police officers is 6 months. So before you allow somebody out in public with a book, you require 7 years of training. But before you allow someone out in public with a gun, it's less than 1.5 years. I think we have an opportunity to do a better job there. The general disconnect between police academy training and job preparation tends to revolve around 2 interesting issues concerning the content and the delivery of the academy curriculum. The typical paramilitary format fails to prepare recruits to work in a manner consistent with the community-oriented police services model, or COPS, and neglects basic principles of adult learning theory. In order to produce officers who are able to successfully perform community-oriented policing techniques, such as proactive collaboration with community leaders, police academies must train recruits to be independent, creative problem solvers. As long as we continue to hold public school teachers to a much higher standard than police officers, the situation will not change, and school teachers do not carry weapons. Representative Johnson did a good job of speaking to the rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question goes to candidate Sutherland. What are your specific plans regarding water rights for individuals, cities, and natural resources such as fishing and wildlife? You have 1.5 minutes.
Well, again, Democrats are in control of the DNR and other agencies that are overseeing these things, and they have been for decades. What we need to do is honor the rights of citizens to have, when they buy land, that the water that's available to them through digging a well or what have you. These should come with the land. These are natural rights. People should have a right to be able to dig their wells and have water on their land. Otherwise, their land becomes nearly useless. What can you do without water on land? So you can't build a home, you can't get permits, you can't farm, you can't raise vegetables or livestock. So water is an inalienable right as far as I'm concerned. It's part of the earth. We're born on it. We are born with these rights, and every individual should have access to water. We shouldn't have to beg for it. We shouldn't have to pay for it, through the government, not counting, sewer services where the water is clean through cities and things like that. But we should have access to our water. We all have a right to fish, to hunt, to hike, to camp, and our government should be encouraging more of these types of activities, not less. Helping our youth to shut off the TV and the video games and to get out and enjoy the great outdoors more so than we have in the past. We've seen when our Democrat-led government has been discouraging these things. They want us to keep our kids home. They want us to stay home. and they use the excuse of staying safe, but getting out and getting vitamin D from the sun, hiking, and getting exercise is what keeps us safe and healthy and builds our immune system.
Thank you. Candidate Johnson, same question to you. What are your specific plans regarding water rights for individuals, cities, and natural resources such as fishing and wildlife?
Water rights are going to have to be managed through each individual watershed. We cannot allow industry or farms to drain every individual's water. Individuals should be given, individual residential use should be given priority over industrial use. And before that, we need to make sure our rivers and streams are full, or none of us are going to have anything. I did, about a month ago, I delivered to a place where the water trucks are parked that haul water out of the concrete reservoir to Burlington to make bottled water with. So I looked up what these companies are paying for water out of that reservoir, and I could only find it from 2014. It was 0.0027 per 1,000 gallons. So 5,000 gallon truck costs $13.50 to fill. If it's triple what it is in 2014, that 5,000 gallon truck costs $40.50. This needs to end. Water is a resource that we cannot literally give away to business for nothing, which is what is going on here. And things like that have a drastic, they will decimate our water system. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Johns, what are your specific plans regarding water rights for individuals, cities, and natural resources such as fishing and wildlife?
Thank you. Thousands of Skagit County residents lost their water rights after more than 20 years of local and state governments kicking the can down the road for someone else to deal with until it blew up in everyone's face. That is not good public policy. I believe we should develop an overarching strategy to return key fishing and wildlife habitat back to as nature had engineered it, and in exchange, target areas of less environmental impact for development. One example is removing fluoride from drinking water. As science tells us, it interferes with the reproductive system of chum salmon, and the Skagit River is a federally protected waterway. If we cannot deliver public policy based on science we already know, nothing else we say about water rights for individuals, cities, and natural resources will ever come to fruition either. Without public policy based upon science, politicians are simply making empty promises they have no plans on actually making good on. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Eslick, what are your specific plans regarding water rights for individuals, cities, and natural resources such as fishing and wildlife?
Thank you, Mr. Wick. In 2017, when I went back to session for the first time, we had to deal with the Hearst decision because the year before they held up the capital budget over the Hearst decision. So we managed to straighten it out for 38 counties, not for Skagit County. And because of that, our Senator Wagner is on a water committee working on making sure that those folks in Skagit continue to use their water. It's very restricted and it is very cumbersome for them. It's but I support, and we stay in contact on how that committee is going and how those folks are dealing with it. And I will continue to support that. I would also like to talk a minute about fishing. I have supported fish hatcheries. We funded several of them 2 years ago, and I continue to believe that that is the direction we need to go. The other is your elk situation in Skagit. That was the very first issue that I was faced with, and it had been going on for several years, that the elk are all over the floor. I was, in the last few years, been able to help them get more hunting permits and also changing some of the procedures on being reimbursed for the damages. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next question, this is our third question out of 6. And this first question, this goes to candidate Johnson. What are your proposals to balance the primary need of our state to fund education and to provide resources for energy, clean air, healthcare, and infrastructure?
I support the creation of a state bank. If you have not watched Senator Hasagawa's presentation on this, we should have done this 100 years ago. I support removing tax breaks, special tax breaks for certain industries that shouldn't have gotten them in the first place. I'm really tired of seeing the state give the wealthy, and I'm tired of individuals paying taxes that developers and industry should pay in the first place, especially when it comes to infrastructure. We could fund most of this through impact fees, and we don't. We wait for the citizens to pay for it 20 years after it should have been funded. I support a capital gains tax. I will not in any way support cutting programs for the masses to keep tax breaks for the few. We are going to have to prioritize. There are a lot of people who are going to find out the meaning of less government in this next budget cycle, and they are not going to like it, and they will not vote for it again. We need to have priorities. We need to raise revenue in ways that we have not before. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Klaus Johns, what are your proposals to balance the primary need of our state to fund education and to provide resources for energy, clean air, healthcare, and infrastructure?
Thank you. Education funding is not competing with energy, clean air, healthcare, or infrastructure. It is mandated by the state constitution. McCleary happened because the state legislature lacked the courage to support progressive taxation, so the state Supreme Court mandated they increase revenues from existing tax sources. I support progressive taxation where those who have more would pay more. I oppose any state budget cut that would lead to a single job loss. No more layoffs. If we are to make budget cuts, it will have to be without making job cuts, or we simply can't make them. Healthcare is a huge issue. The University of Washington stepped into a national leadership position with COVID-19 and is now facing a $500 million budget shortfall. Healthcare providers have suggested as much as a 40% rate increase for next year, which millions of working families cannot afford. We need to take another look at the State Healthcare Trust and may need to implement this sooner rather than later, just to protect the health insurance people are already depending on right now. Clean land, water, and air is already supervised by the Department of Ecology. I believe we should create a state EPA organization to pursue environmental offenders even more aggressively than we have in the past and use the increased legal proceeds to self-fund this agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn Eslick, what are your proposals to balance the primary need of our state to fund education and to provide resources for energy, clean air, healthcare, and infrastructure?
Thank you. It is a state constitution that we fund basic education. So there's no question that that has to happen. The problem is at this moment, we don't know what our budget looks like. Had we been invited back to a special session and have been confided in and been negotiated with early on in this pandemic, we might not be in the state that we are in today. So many small businesses have gone out of business, so many family history businesses. I heard today Woolley Market is closed for good. So those are sad to us that have watched them through the years. I don't want to see that happen anymore. We've got to encourage economic development. We have to encourage small business startups. I do not believe in the state bank because you look at Employment Security Department, government does not deal with these kinds of things successfully. So in order to have, we just, in my opinion, must not have a state bank that would be detrimental to our whole state of Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Sutherland, what are your proposals to balance the primary need of our state to fund education and to provide resources for energy, clean air, healthcare, and infrastructure?
Thank you. And I just want your listeners to understand that my opponent, if you listen to them, they're not happy with the status quo. Well, guess what? I'm not either. But his party is the party in charge. His party is the one that are causing all the job layoffs and things like that. As far as education, educational dollars have doubled over the past 10 years. It took Olympia 120 years to reach $7 billion from taxpayers regarding education. 120 years. Yet with the Democrats in charge, it's taken only 10 years to double that to $14 billion. We don't have a revenue problem, an educational revenue problem here in Washington State. We have a Democrat-controlled legislature that does not know how to balance a budget, does not know how to prioritize its spending. That's the problem we have. Now, in the 39th, the voters we have a strong Republican presence here, but we need a strong Republican presence throughout the state and down in Olympia for us to fix these things. My Democratic opponents can whine about them, but voters need to understand where the problem originates. It originates with the Democrat Party being in control, a one-party control system, and it's ruining our education system for our kids. The money, if you ask me, the money should follow the child. I'm writing a bill that will do just that. It'll allow parents to have a greater choice of where their kids go to school and whether or not they can afford to do so. Let the money follow the child. Let the parent make the choice of where they want to send their kids to school. Thank you.
Next question. We'll start with candidate Klaus Johns. School districts are often dependent on unstable resources such as timberlands. What do you think must be done to provide fair, sustainable, dependable funding for every school, no matter where it is in the state of Washington?
Thank you. Timberlands are not an unstable resource. We know how many acres of trees we have. We know how long it takes for a tree to grow. We know how old a tree has to be to have commercial value to harvest. The state should be able to forecast a 10-year average for school districts to budget for. However, climate change and forest fires may create instability with public timberlands as a resource. All school districts should be allowed to operate on a 4-day school week. All school districts should be able to operate year-round with summer breaks and current vacation schedule evenly divided among the 4 quarters. Student education dollars should stay in the district where they reside. They should not follow the student. The property that's being taxed is not moving. If somebody doesn't want to stay in the district they're in, especially if they're in a small district, then whatever school wants to receive them, that's their privilege. But when you're a small school administrator and you have 30 students leave, that means you're going to probably have to cut programs that could have kept those students there. I think it's irresponsible to have the money following the student instead of staying with the community where those funds belong. The state takes one headcount snapshot for funding at the beginning of the school year that remains unchanged for the entire year. If they went to a system with one snapshot, that would allow school administrators to budget for the entire year based on a stable budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Carolyn Eslick, same question. School districts are often dependent on unstable resources such as timberlands. What do you think must be done to provide fair, sustainable, dependable funding for every school, no matter where it is in the state of Washington?
I hear every day from the trouble they're in for lack of funding. Just 2 weeks ago, referring to timber sales, we were up against the fence with the county, one county council member wanting to take property out of DNR and transfer it to Snohomish County to be made into a park. We fought tooth and nails to stop that from happening, and it didn't happen. So we are again out of the woods, so to speak, and that property, timberland, will be harvested very shortly, and that money will go to our local schools and libraries and fire department. So the only reason that that is unstable is because people are fighting it, and they believe that if we cut those trees, then we will save the forest. And in reality, that is not managing the forest, and that's why we have so many, part of the reason we have so many forest fires. It is, I truly believe that that particular funding is important that we keep. The rest of the funding, I think we need to look at some of the way they're being funded, because I think our rural areas are still being slighted, and there must be a better way. That is not my committee, so I'm not real familiar with it, but would be looking into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Sutherland, would you like me to read the question again?
No, that's fine. Save a little bit of time there.
Okay.
We've got to prioritize our state budget line item by line item, and then we must fund education first. We must put our kids first before any other function of government, roads, hospitals, military, all the rest. We need to fund education first, and that way we know, without a doubt, we've got enough money going in to take care of the next generation. Again, we don't have a school revenue problem here in Washington State. We have a government led by Democrats that has a spending problem, and they fail to prioritize the budget in a manner that safeguards our kids in school. It puts them at risk by not doing so, because when there's a budget shortfall like we're seeing now, some of the first programs to be cut are education. And this is just not the proper way to do it. My opponent says the money following the child is, I forget his exact wording, irresponsible or something like that. The opposite is true. We must prioritize our kids, put them number one, let the money follow the child, let the parent decide what educational facility is the best one for their particular child, and let the money and that child go to that facility so the kid can get the best education possible. Forcing a child to stay in a downtown in a failing school is not helping the child. It's helping the system. It's helping the government. And that's something that we all abhor. We see it in the daily news. We need to free up the parents and the children to be able to go to the best school possible for that child.
Thank you. Candidate Johnson, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, sir. Until 2019, the Arlington School District got zero in impact fees. All of these people who want the money to follow the child are going to find out that there's no money there. And the Arlington School District is supposed to take in literally almost 40%. The town has grown almost 40% since 2000. With nearly the same amount of money that they had in 2000. All of this development that has gone on in Arlington, the only source they get revenue from is from buildings that are either apartments or single family homes with more than one bedroom. That will not work. This is why all your kids are going to schools in portables. This is true everywhere. We don't want anybody to pay impact fees, so we make the schools deal with it, and this is how they deal with it. I've read the McCleary case. It's 80 pages. I'm still the only person I know who sat down and read the case. McCleary makes it very clear how to fund schools. McCleary is about districts that's used levies to survive for their most basic survival, and other districts having everything. If you want, I will make this very easy. You have to take from the rich districts and give it to the poor districts. There is no other way. It is that simple. Thank you.
Thank you. This is question number 5, and we'll go to candidate Robert Sutherland. A major connecting corridor through the 39th district is State Highway 9, much of which travels through rural areas where residents have safety concerns. How would you address this?
This is very near and dear to my heart. I live right off of, not just a few miles off of Highway 9. I travel Highway 9, 522, Highway 2 in my district all the time, and it is a mess at times. Highway 9 has been neglected by the Democrats in Olympia for decades, plain and simple. They could have fixed this 40 years ago. They have a 40-year plan. They've let it go. They've dropped the ball. They've not put the money in, even though taxpayers are paying all the tolls and the gas tax and the registration and sales tax on their automobiles. We've paid the money, and we don't know where it's gone, to tell you the truth. It's gone elsewhere, but it hasn't gone into Highway 9 and other roads and infrastructure here in the 39th. I've talked with many Democrats, in local government and down in Olympia, and I'm telling your voters right now, the Democrats simply have no desire whatsoever to solve the traffic congestion problem. None. It's not a priority to them. They feel that the greater the pain for commuters, then the better, because they feel it's better if the more pain we have, the better it is, because they want us out of our vehicles. They want us into government-controlled transportation, buses, trains, and things like that. So it's not by mistake that Highway 9 has not been given the attention it needs. It's because of Democrat control in Olympia.
Thank you. Candidate Eslick, same question. A major connecting corridor through the 39th District is State Highway 9, much of which travels through rural areas where residents have safety concerns. How would you address this?
So Lake Stevens area on Highway 9 has gotten several safety improvements over the last few years because of the expansion of their city. And the facts are, we watch money for transportation end up in Seattle. The only way that we can get it to our Highway 9 is to be the squeaky wheel. We have to form a committee, a group of citizens that are requesting safety improvements and being really specific about that, just like Highway 2 Safety Coalition did 25 years ago and ended up with $60 million worth of safety improvements. The same thing can happen with Highway 9. It takes a long time to get anything through government, as I have really found out over the last 3 years, but this is where it starts. The people have to stand up and not allow all the money to go to Seattle. So I would be very happy to even help coordinate that group of folks and the location where it needs to be done. It is, again, the squeaky wheel that gets things done, and you have to be sitting at the table at the right time. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Johns, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, sir, I'll be okay. Thank you. When the state voted for $30 car tabs, that took $500 million a year out of transportation funding. My opponent supports $30 car tabs and supports increasing spending on transportation, but there's no money to do that. What we should be looking at is reducing the speed limit, perhaps 10 miles an hour over the entire highway, not because it's fun, but because it's free. We should look at installing roundabouts at key locations as budgets permit, and promote working from home as a statewide traffic strategy. Fixing transportation issues is both expensive and complicated. With the state facing more than a $4 billion budget shortfall in the next 2 years, a win over the next 2 years would simply be not cutting any transportation funding. Capitalism thrives on competition, and a state public bank would provide competition to commercial banks. Commercial banks control state construction projects, including transportation, through issuing commercial bonds. Right now, the state is tapped out. The banks won't let us build any more roads than what we already have funded. When we fully funded education, the state also pulled $400 million out of the State Public Works Trust to fund education. If we had a state public bank, we could fund all $400 million in shovel-ready projects right now, and many of those include transportation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Candidate Ryan Johnson, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, sir. Any legislator that tells you you're going to get $30 tabs and they're going to cut the gas tax and they're going to build roads is lying to you, period. And you can see that in the results. If they could do that, they would have done it by now, and all our roads would have been paved with gold. It never ceases to amaze me that in a district with so many truck drivers, so many heavy equipment operators, so many loggers, that legislators think that they can just name their price for what these projects should cost. Here you go, guys. Standard dump truck and pup, $165 an hour. No materials. That's what it costs. You're not going to get it for 20 because you think you should. Roundabouts, Average roundabout, $2.5 million. That's the most basic one. There are transportation projects today that would take up more than all of the year's gas tax revenue or the vast majority of it. One of those is the Highway 2 trestle. Everybody wants to say there's plenty of money there, but they won't tell you what it costs. I tried this when I got my roof done. I tried to get my roof done for free. They all said no. So I had to pay them, and I had to pay them the market rate. You're not going to get a roundabout built for $10,000 because that's what you think it costs, because that wouldn't cover the cost of the rebar. We can pay and get stuff built, or we cannot pay and not get anything built. There is no other way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here is our sixth and final question of the evening, and we go right back to you, candidate Ryan Johnson. What is the role of government in protecting the public safety and modeling leadership in times of crisis such as this pandemic?
If you would like to look at both Sutherland and Eslick's Facebook page, you will see them going to COVID-friendly events, just like college kids at a frat party. And they do it all the time. And they do it over and over and over. This is the reason we're not open. People are not, even if we opened up everything today, people are not going to go out. A sizable amount of people are just going to stay home. And I delivered to a Chevron station today in Blaine. And I talked to the owner, and he said, 90% of my business is gone. It's all cross-border. It's not coming back until this problem is solved, because Canadians will not come. They are not going to deal with it. That is exactly how the public is going to act. The people who are so worried about their freedom being limited, literally 100 years ago, we had mask mandates where they did lock you up. And I'm still waiting for somebody to explain to me how that was a Nazi plot, because nobody knew what a Nazi was in 1918 or 1920. You're limiting your own freedom by not wearing a mask, and you're limiting the freedom of others. And all of these businesses being shut down that you supposedly care about so much, you are the ones keeping them closed. So look in the mirror when you want somebody to blame. We should all be wearing masks. That is the only way we will ever open up again. There is no other way. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Klaus Jones, what is the role of government in protecting the public safety and modeling leadership in times of crisis, such as this pandemic?
Thank you. According to the National League of Cities, public safety is one of the core roles of local government that includes disaster preparedness and relief, community policing, confronting domestic and international terrorism, gun control measures, and more. When this pandemic started, the State Emergency Management Division gathered and analyzed information and coordinated our statewide response. Early information was not always reliable, and the federal government began never-before-seen strategy of competing with state agencies for resources. This prompted our governor to issue a stay-home, stay-safe order until better information and more comprehensive resources could be established. The state government's role was to save lives and reopen our economy as soon as possible. On this, science and politics do not agree. Modeling leadership is about managing beliefs to maintain a common purpose. We are a resilient society who can handle setbacks and bad news. We cannot handle uncertainty and division, which leads to my opponent. During the stay home, stay safe orders, my opponent took a gun to Olympia and threatened a revolution against our governor and threatened law enforcement officers policing the public safety. You simply cannot threaten police officers and claim to be a law and order candidate who respects public safety. When the chips were down, my opponent refused to do his job and lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Robert Sutherland, what is the role of government in protecting the public safety and modeling leadership in times of crisis such as this pandemic?
Thank you, Mr. Wick. That last comment by my opponent was hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing. If you were there and if you listened to my speech down in Olympia, I did call for a revolution of love, where parents could get their kids out of the house, away from the video games, off the TV, take them fishing, take them hiking, take them camping, get out, get some vitamin D from the sun, get some exercise, build up your immune system. That's how you safeguard our children. You don't do it by sticking them in a house when they're healthy and making them stay there for months on end, nor in a classroom or anywhere else. You got to get our kids up and out and exercising, and you can do so safely. Sitting out, in a boat in the middle of a lake, you can hike with social distancing. If it were crowded, you can put a mask on if you felt that helped. I am a scientist, unlike my Democrat. Apparently, I have two opponents. I am a scientist. I have looked at the data, and I'm telling you, there are other areas, other countries, Sweden, there are other states around the country who are not wearing masks, who are not mandating healthy people be quarantined, and they're doing just fine. That's the data that they're refusing to look at. I look at it, and I say we can do better. We can open up our businesses safely. Why on earth are we letting large box stores stay open, Home Depot, Walmart, drugstores, and we can't have the local mom and pop florist store open up or a hardware store? Why is one okay to open up and the other's not? We can do so safely. This government led by Democrats are shutting down our small businesses, and they're bad for the working family.
Thank you. Candidate Carolyn Eslick, what is the role of government in protecting the public safety and modeling leadership in times of crisis such as this pandemic?
Sure, public safety is number one in government. When this pandemic hit, we all agreed that shutting down for those first 2 weeks was the way that we should handle it. It was after that we had no say in how we were going to pursue and continue on with our lives. We should have been involved in decision making. We should have had a special session. We should have been down in Olympia or on Zoom. I believe that the social distancing is important, especially to some people. The thing that I did not agree with is shutting the churches down and Walmart is still open. That makes no sense to me. I was so happy to be able to drive by a church today and say October 4th, we get to be inside. This will be our first church service inside. I plan on going. Will I wear a mask? I might not. I want you to know that I do believe in social distancing, especially when I'm in a crowd of people. I think that we have got to use some common sense. And so many times during this pandemic, I have looked at somebody and said, where is our common sense during this whole thing? Yes, we have to be careful. But you know what? Our rural areas do not have the cases like the cities do. Thank you.
Don, you're on mute. Don, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Thank you, Carolyn Eslick, for responding. Thank you to all the candidates for responding to the questions, and that concludes the question portion of this program. It is now time for concluding statements. Candidate Carolyn Eslick, you have you go first, and you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be on this forum. I always look forward to these because it gives me a chance to really think about some of the really important issues that face our nation and our state. What I found out when I went to Olympia was you have to know quite a bit about a lot of subjects. And if you don't, you better learn them. It has been a huge education for me. I have found that I have passion, total passion for the transportation problem that we have in the state. They are staying home with so many people staying home with these jobs is not a bad thing. And we're finding out that it's taking the cars off the streets, which is saving lots for us, saving pollution, saving all of those things. But it is not going to be a permanent situation with everybody, and things will get back to normal to some degree. I also found that in mental health arena that I have a huge passion for that, and I found that we have funded many millions of dollars for mental health and behavioral health. And so we are now building buildings and centers to take care of them. But what we're lacking now are the providers. So now we have to recruit in those careers to help our folks. And this will help homelessness in the future if we can capture young people with mental illness early. I've also found that some of the things that are passed in Olympia are not best for everybody. And I've been working hard to make sure that the sex education bill is turned over in November. Thank you.
You're on mute, Don.
Thank you, Carolyn Eslick. Candidate Ryan Johnson, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
I want to thank everybody for having me here tonight. I hope that you have seen that I am not the average legislator. I'm going to tell you the truth, even when it's not politically favorable to me. I'm not going to pander to a very small political base. I have no desire for that. I'm going to tell you what I think I can do and help you as a legislator in any way I can. My opponent makes promises she can't keep, and she knows she won't keep. Her, straight out of the voters pamphlet, was one of her biggest priorities was public health. Well, I can see on her Facebook page, she does not care one bit. What she cares about is pandering to her political base. And she doesn't care how much COVID she spreads or how many public health mandates she breaks. She doesn't care anything about the people. She just wants to get elected. I will not knock on your door. I will not ask a volunteer to knock on your door. If it takes one person getting COVID for me to get elected, it is not worth it. That is a huge tax placed on that person if all they have to do is stay home for 2 weeks. If they get medical bills, that is life-changing. And our legislators should listen to public health and have enough compassion to not go to COVID-friendly events. This is not hard, but they can't resist. My opponent is promising a Sultan bypass. Nobody alive in Washington today will be alive if it ever gets built at our present level of funding. She knows it. She knows it. But she's still making promises she knows she can't keep. This will not happen with me. You deserve better, and you will get better if you vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Robert Sutherland, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you, Don. Well, once again, I'd like to encourage anyone that's watching this program that if they desire things like lower property taxes, greater educational choices for their children, educational tax dollars following the child to an educational facility of their choosing, less traffic congestion, a decrease in homelessness, a decrease in crime, a decrease in drug addiction, an increase in the rule of law and order, help for those suffering from behavioral health issues, and a better Washington, then please walk away from the Democrat candidates you're seeing on this screen today. Walk away from them, their party, and their philosophy, because it's the trouble we're seeing in Olympia today. The problems they highlight, I didn't highlight them, they highlighted them. The problems that they highlighted this evening they come directly from their own party, and they say they're going to fix them. They say they're going to go to Olympia and fix the problems. And I'm telling you, it doesn't work that way. When you go down there as a new legislator, you're part of a caucus, and they have a large caucus. You're the new guy. Sit down and shut up, and you'll do what they tell you to do. That's how it works down there. They're not going to go down there and make any changes. If voters want change, if they want less traffic congestion, better schools, and the like of what I just read, they need to switch the rulership down in Olympia. They need to consider the Republican Party, Republican candidates. We will get the job done. We will put people to work building lane capacity on Highway 9, Highway 2, 522, and elsewhere on the I-5, the 405. We're going to put good union jobs, good union workers to work building the infrastructure this state needs. We Republicans are going to do that. We've got existing money. We're going to prioritize the budget. We're going to get the economy going, put people back to work. We're going to get our kids back in school, and we're going to show the voters of Washington State what it's like to have a Republican-controlled Olympia.
Thank you. Candidate Klaus Jones, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for providing this forum for our Skagit County voters. This is a great community service. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the state's largest union, the Washington Education Association, for endorsing our campaign in recognition for our commitment to keep kids first. You know, the first promise that you make as a public official to the voters is your oath of office. RCW 430120 is the oath of office. It states, "I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office to the best of my ability." Our state constitution, Article 1, Section 24, the right to bear arms, says the right of the individual citizen to bear arms in defense of himself or the state shall not be impaired. But nothing in this section shall be construed as authorizing individuals or corporations to organize, maintain, or employ an armed body of men. The 39th LD is facing a severe leadership crisis from our elected representatives. I support creating jobs with the state public bank, creating a high school skilled trades apprenticeship program, and creating green energy projects to replace 4 Snake River dams to help our struggling Chinook salmon population. School funding is tied to property values. My opponent, Sutherland, said his top priority is passing House Bill 2960 to eliminate state property taxes. My opponent said his top priority is defunding public schools, according to the Office of Financial Management, by $3.4 billion a year. He was pictured at a Black Lives Matter rally carrying an assault rifle and a pistol. And the Seattle Times reported he also went to Olympia carrying a gun and threatened violence against both the governor and law enforcement officials because he doesn't like the way the state is keeping people safe from COVID-19. I think Sutherland is unfit for office. Thank you.
Thank you to all candidates this evening. This concludes our discussion. We want to acknowledge the City of Sedro-Woolley and Mayor Julia Johnson for their outstanding support. We also would like to extend special thanks to Bill Chambers, Sedro-Woolley's IT director, and his team for their recording and technical assistance. Also, big thank yous to Ed West, who is the timer this evening. He's also the vice president of the Skagit County League of Women Voters, for his support. To Eric Johnson for technical support here in the studio. To Kathy Ream, the Voter Services Committee Chair for the League of Women Voters in Skagit County, and her studio is where we are broadcasting from, which would be her house, and thanks to her family for providing support. And to Wendy Sanderson for her support. She's the president of the Skagit County League of Women Voters. We invite you to learn more about these candidates. Look at the Vote 411 website, where participating candidates can place information for your convenience. Go to their websites and social media pages. You can find us at our website, www.skagit.lwv.org, or find us on Facebook at League of Women Voters of Skagit County. We will repost the links to this on our League website, municipal and community pages. Feel free to send the links to others. Ballots will be mailed out, by the way, on October 16th or by October 16th. Please remember to sign the ballot and put it in a ballot drop box before 8 p.m. on November 3rd, 2020. That's Election Day. If using the U.S. mail, remember the postmark is critical. Allow an extra several days for mail service, or use a handy elections department ballot box, again, which are located throughout the county. Again, thank you to all candidates for participating in this League forum, and we sure appreciate your willingness to serve as well. So thank you again. And the League of Women Voters just does an outstanding job. Watch for other forums throughout the Northwest this year. Thank you for taking your time to view this broadcast. Please vote and encourage others to do so. Thank you. All right, up in a few minutes, we'll take a little bit of a break. We have the two Senate candidates, and we'll look forward to that. We have Catherine Lewandowski and Keith Wagner. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Great job, you guys. Ed, good. Ready, Bill?
Recording has resumed.
Hello, my name is Don Wick, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Skagit County, I would like to welcome you to this candidate forum. I will serve as the moderator. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose candidates. We encourage the informed and active participation of all citizens. Membership is open to men and women of all ages, and we invite you to join us. We acknowledge the candidates joining us for this forum, and we appreciate those of you viewing this. We hope you will learn more about those who wish to represent us. Each candidate will be invited to do an opening and closing statement of 2 minutes. Community submitted questions have been provided to candidates. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond. Time may prevent asking all the questions presented. Today, we welcome candidates for the office of Washington Senate District 39. Our state senators serve 4-year terms. The Senate, in conjunction with the House of Representatives, meets in session each year to create new laws, change existing laws, and enact budgets for the state. I'd like to introduce the Senate candidates running to represent Washington's 39th Legislative District in the November general election in alphabetical order. We welcome Catherine Lewandowski and Keith Wagner. Our timer will be tracking the time, which begins with green as it counts down, turns yellow when 15 seconds remain. When it turns red, time is up, so please stop talking. We ask that candidates be respectful of the time allowed. If you speak beyond the time limit, your microphone will be muted. We will begin with a 2-minute introductory statement from each candidate. Candidate Lewandowski, would you please unmute yourself and begin with your opening statement?
Sure. Hi, thank you for inviting me to this forum. I really appreciate all of the work that the League has been doing in the years past and with what I've been currently seeing as being a part of this campaign. It's been quite eye-opening for me, and I commend you for your commitment to our government and our electoral process. Anyway, I'm a mother and a grandmother and a wife, and I'm also a registered nurse here in the state of Washington. I've been a registered nurse for about 30 plus years that I've been working in healthcare. And most of my career I've been at the bedside, taking care of patients at the bedside. And so healthcare has been quite a priority to me because I've seen all the damage that has happened because of our broken healthcare system. And it's been pretty hurtful. Because of my responsibilities as a mother and a grandmother, and also as a daughter, taking care of my elderly parents when they were sick, it was hard for me to do much more than my career and all of those other responsibilities. But since my children have gotten older and now my parents have passed away, I do have more time, and I've been able to focus more. So for the last, since about 2017, I've been working very hard on Medicare for All, expanded and improved Medicare for All, both at the national level and with a group, Whole Washington, where we've been working to get a single-payer universal healthcare comprehensive medical plan for everyone in Washington. And that's been very exciting. I've been it's been an honor to work with all of the volunteers at Whole Washington. And whether or not I win this election, we will continue that work with others that hopefully will get elected. And myself, we just.
Thank you, Candidate Lewandowski. Candidate Keith Wagner, please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. I'm Senator Keith Wagner. It's been my great honor to serve you these past 3 legislative sessions. I have represented the people of Washington State on the Ways and Means Committee, the K-12 Education Committee, and I'm the ranking member on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. I grew up in Skagit County on a goat farm in Alger, and I graduated from Burlington Edison High School. My summers were spent working in the fields, picking berries, cucumbers, driving pea viners and trucks for the valley's farmers. And though a lot's changed since then, I remain deeply connected to and protective of our rural culture. I attended the United States Naval Academy, where I earned a Bachelor of Science in Physical Oceanography and later a Master of Science in Global Leadership from the University of San Diego. My Navy career as a helicopter pilot lasted 23 years before I returned to the Valley to raise my family. I've worked hard in my time in Olympia to build alliances and friends with my caucus and across the aisle, because no one goes to Olympia and changes things on their own. I often hear candidates and sometimes other legislators say they're down there to fight for this cause or they're fight to that cause, which sounds fine to the base and energizes people. But today, finding a fight in politics is the easiest thing in the world to do. I'm in Olympia to work towards solutions, and that's the only way to make progress where I sit in a minority. And I have the results to prove that that philosophy works. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In this next session of the forum, we will move to the response to questions which have been prepared by league members and provided to the candidates in advance. Each candidate will be asked to respond to the same question as they are called upon. Candidate Wagner, you will have the first question here. The question is, in your legislative role, please address training, transparency, and accountability for law enforcement personnel.
Okay, thank you. First, before the legislature starts getting into the issue, we need to make sure our own house is in order and transparency. And I would remind the voters out there that I was one of the few senators who voted against special public disclosure rules for the legislature. When I was in Sedro-Woolley, our police force was one of the first to employ video cameras on our officers, because those cameras protect our officers and they protect the people that they interact with. It's not a perfect solution because the administrative burden it places on cities and sheriff's departments and other municipalities is immense. And I think the state needs to come up with some improvements and reasonable rules so that we can have cameras deployed at all times and also not hamstring local government with abusive disclosure requests. I think it's worth saying that when I ran for mayor here in the city of Sedro-Woolley, my platform promised that our first responders and police department would have the best training and equipment possible. And that's what makes policing better, not defunding or diverting funds. And we also brought in more officers on the force, and that's important because police officers are people too, and they're subject to stress and exhaustion. And we need to provide for their mental health needs and their families. And to do that, we need a larger number of officers. And finally, I'd like to say, I was selected as the Fraternal Order of Police Legislator of the Year because I look after our men in blue and women in blue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidate Wagner. Now, candidate Lewandowski, if you can unmute yourself, you'll have 1.5 minutes to answer the question. Here's the question. In your legislative role, please address training, transparency, and accountability for law enforcement personnel.
Well, yes, I do feel that we need to work and improve our training a little bit. We can't hold our law enforcement personnel accountable for their actions if they are not adequately trained. And it just seems to me that we're seeing too much of people overusing their power, and that just demeans the process. We need to work on our standards of engagement that have to be met before we're using lethal force, and I just feel like it's not happening. So we need to work on the training. We obviously have to have transparency, because in this day and age, where everybody's got a video camera in their pocket, if you're not transparent, it's going to become pretty clear that when the things are trying to be hidden, and that just creates less trust in our law enforcement personnel. And trust is something that needs to be earned. It isn't something that can be forced on anybody. So I believe that our law enforcement people do need to work hard to try to earn some of that trust back. I'm just kind of ashamed, though, that it takes the threat of people with video cameras in their pocket that's going to encourage us to.
Thank you. Candidate Lewandowski, you also get the second question here. What are your specific plans regarding water rights for individuals, cities, and natural resources such as fishing and wildlife?
Sorry. Well, you know, I don't really have any specific plans, but I do know that there are people with specific plans on protecting all of those. And I feel that we need to be doing all that we can to be balancing the needs of humans, our planet, and all of the other species that we share this planet with. We need to be making balanced judgments that are not being influenced by how much a corporation is giving to a candidate, which is why it is so important to get the money out of our politics and to allow our elected officials to be chosen from those that are being governed, not those who are being paid to represent any corporation's interests. And along with healthcare, I think it will be one of my top priorities because most of us are not going to be able to hop on any spaceship and head off to another planet. There is no planet B for the majority of us. And so we need to take care of what we have responsibly and realize that we're all in it together.
Thank you. Keith Wagner, what are your specific plans regarding water rights for individuals, cities, and natural resources, such as fishing and wildlife?
Well, I co-chair the Joint Task Force on Water for Skagit usage, and I've admitted many times that I went into that role thinking we're going to have a quick and friendly solution that respected everybody's interests, and that simply hasn't been the case. And Skagit's unique across the state in that we were excluded from the Hearst legislation, largely due to the court ruling in the Swinomish case. Now, I personally think that we look at responsibilities on this backwards when it comes to water rights on private property, because as it stands now, the individual has to prove there's no negative effects or mitigate for them if there are any. And there is no reasonable mitigation plan that's been developed yet. I think the state should have the burden of proof when it comes to property disputes, and I introduced legislation to that effect. I also introduced legislation that would require the state to compensate landowners for the loss of value when they're denied building permits due to water. Because think about it, you're an individual and you have very limited resources. I couldn't hire an attorney to fight for my case, but the state has unlimited resources to punish you if they want to do it. And we've seen that happen here in Skagit County. So those two bills, both of which I was the prime sponsor of, neither one has received a hearing, and neither one will receive a hearing as long as I'm in the minority.
Thank you. Candidate Wagner is the third question. What are your proposals to balance the primary need of our state to fund education and to provide resources for energy, clean air, healthcare, and infrastructure?
Wow, so that's a short question that kind of asks how we're going to fix the entire state, and it's too big of a question for a minute and a half. So I'll have to take this journey one step at a time. There's not any one solution. The first step should have been not enacting all the spending that went into effect on July 1st. The legislature should have been called into special session so we could work together with the governor's office to cut and prioritize spending. But that didn't happen. Tragic error. So we've gone from a budget deficit projection of about $8.5 billion to a new projection of only $4 billion. And people are saying that's great news. That's like me saying Uncle Bill fell off the ladder and broke 2 legs and then following up with, no, he only broke 1. Isn't that great news? Well, of course it's not. And we still have a huge problem. There is some good news, and that is that we have more coming in than we spent in the 2017-18 biennium, which means we know we've done without that high spending, so we can do it again. And I'm not advocating that we'd make across-the-board cuts. I think we have to be very surgical so that we can protect our vulnerable populations. But make no mistake, difficult choices are going to have to be made, and I think I'm the one who should be making them.
I apologize for not starting the time.
Oh, did I go over? I guess we don't know.
Don't know?
Thank you. Catherine Lewandowski, same question. What are your proposals to balance the primary need of our state to fund education and to provide resources for energy, clean air, healthcare, and infrastructure?
Well, yeah, I kind of have to agree with Ken that I thought this was a really long question that incorporated a whole lot of things. But I really have strong feelings regarding our state's role in funding our public education. And I feel we have a lot of work to do in order to try and remove the inequities in our current funding mechanisms. But I think the next question goes into that in more detail. But I've been an active participant in the development and the promotion of Senate Bill 5222. And I feel that it is a piece of legislation that will deliver us affordable, comprehensive health care that will get us through this pandemic. I'm so proud of all the work that has gone into this bill by whole Washington volunteers, Senator Chase, Dr. Gerald Friedman, and many others. And with our $4.5 billion shortfall that we're having to worry about, I believe that if we can emergently act that, we can certainly take care of our $4 billion shortfall, because this bill saves us $9 billion a year over what we already pay for our health care. Through taking back the profits from our health insurance industry, and also by giving people adequate health care. We waste so much money because we don't allow people people can't go to the doctor. And so we end up treating things that are just, that could be handled at at a doctor's office by just keeping them in their insulin, keeping people on their blood pressure medication, giving them basic health care, and keeping them out of the crisis situation. So I think that is what we need to work on first. Also, along with climate, I've also been working on a bill that's kind of in my back pocket that I pull out every now and then that I really want to work on, which that I worked on when I was working with the Women's Caucus of the Green Party of the United States, and that's for public funding of elections.
Your time is up on that question. My apologies.
Okay.
Here's question number 4 to you, Catherine. School districts are often dependent on unstable resources such as timberlands. What do you think must be done to provide fair, sustainable, dependable funding for every school, no matter where it is in the state of Washington?
Yeah, I believe that just like global funding for our hospitals, both rural and in the cities, we need to look at global funding budgets for our state schools. I really feel that our current methods of requiring such duplication of efforts throughout the state in order to try and pass local levies and bonds is just not a productive use of our time and our resources. And I just really feel that every child deserves to have the same level of education. I don't see how we can say that any children are less valuable than any others. So I really think that looking at global funding of our public schools, it would be a better method of providing fair, sustainable, and dependable funding of all of our schools and for all of our children.
Thank you very much. Candidate Keith Wagner. School districts are often dependent on unstable resources such as timberlands. What do you think must be done to provide fair, sustainable, dependable funding for every school, no matter where it is in the state of Washington?
Well, Catherine's absolutely right that it should not depend on where you live, what kind of access you have to a good education. And I'm going to say Klaus Jones was right in his earlier statement that the trees are not the problem. We have mismanaged that resource through DNR, and the Public Lands Administration has taken timber off the books that doesn't have to be off the books. And we need to really look at that closely when I go back to Olympia. Going back to McCleary, that solution, that was a revolutionary solution. And I think the court was right to impose it upon us, because the richer school districts that have high value property taxes can earn millions of dollars by just a small raise in a tax. But in rural districts where we live, it's $4 or $5 or $6 per thousand to earn the same amount of money. So McCleary was a big step in the right direction, but we changed the whole engine in the car. It wasn't a tune-up. So there's lots of problems that we need to go back and individually fix. And we made a big mistake when we immediately raised the levy lid, which was what got us into trouble in the first place. I've characterized that on the Senate floor as a race to inequity. We just started the race over again when we took the levies and threw them back on the table and said, go for it. Big mistake, wish we would not have done that.
Thank you, Keith Wagner. And candidate Wagner, here's question number 5. A major connecting corridor through the 39th district is State Highway 9, much of which travels through rural areas where residents have safety concerns. How would you address this?
Right, and I would add to that Highway 2, 522 going through Monroe, 530 in the Arlington area, and the excessive traffic we have on 20. We've got transportation issues across the district and across the state. Now, unfortunately, all the money from the past transportation budget has been spoken for in projects. So depending on whether the $30 tab things hangs or doesn't hang, we're going to have a different type of a problem. What's going to happen is there's going to have to be another transportation budget. And that's a difficult thing because now you have to look at it and make sure that that's not going to stifle our economic growth. It's not going to hurt farmers. It's not going to put an undue burden on rural people because that's us. And it's still going to solve some of these problems. So I think that there'll be a transportation budget in the next legislative session. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it yet because I'm not sure what's in it, but I hope that it's something that is acceptable so that I can present it to our constituents as a possible solution. We got to have a way to come up with the money. And one plan, which I think is a great plan, was to take retail auto sales and constitutionally link that to transportation. That requires the legislature, of course, to be weaned off of that money because it now goes into the general fund. But I think that's a great solution.
Thank you very much. Same question, Catherine Lewandowski. A major connecting corridor through the 39th district is State Highway 9, much of which travels through rural areas where residents have safety concerns. How would you address this?
Well, again, I have to admit that I'm not a transportation expert, and it's another area where I would be having to look to those who know a lot more than myself. And there are others who are running even for office whom I have been very excited to work with during this campaign in addressing many of those issues, namely Ryan Johnson and Klaus Jones. They have had wonderful ideas. What I can say about these issues is that both here in Snohomish County and where I grew up in rural Pierce County, what I have seen is the standard is that developers have been allowed to develop without adequately addressing the transportation needs of our local communities. It always seems like transportation infrastructure is always 10 to 20 years or more behind the development. And I just think that we can do better than that we should be able to offer more foresight when it comes to predicting our transportation needs.
Thank you very much, Catherine Lewandowski. And question number 6, we start with you. Catherine, what is the role of government in protecting the public safety and modeling leadership in times of crisis such as this pandemic?
Well, that is the government's role. Leaders from their communities who will protect the public safety in times of crisis and who are capable of leading their communities forward to a safer, more secure future. That's what we're there for. History has shown us that for-profit corporations don't or won't protect public safety. Why? I do not quite understand why. Are we a species that only looks to our own self-interest over the needs of the many? I certainly hope not. Not if we want to survive, and humans have always banded together to form societies and governments to help protect our own survival as a species. Our current economic woes and this pandemic has proven how much we need true leaders who are not profiting off of the system or are beholden to the corporations to be the ones who are overseeing our system and our government. We need true leaders who are not beholden to the for-profit corporations and who can navigate these stormy waters unencumbered.
Thank you very much, Candidate Lewandowski. Candidate Wagner, same question. Keith, what is the role of government in protecting the public safety and modeling leadership in times of crisis such as this pandemic?
Well, I certainly try to lead by example, but I'm not a person that thinks I have all the answers or government has all the answers. So we need to be careful what we're modeling. My constituents are intelligent, thoughtful people who are capable of making many of their own decisions. And in the case of COVID, where I personally know 3 people who died, including one close relative of mine, we know a lot more now than we did in the beginning. So my opinion is we focused almost exclusively on the direct effects of the disease and ignored all the secondary and tertiary effects of damaging policy that we've implemented. So there's real mayhem and death as a result of our policy and as a result of excluding the legislature and local government for helping to make some of these decisions. Suicides are up, child abuse is reported up, battered wives are up, spouses are trapped at home, kids aren't going to school where there's mandatory reporters. All of these things should have been and should be considered. And that's leadership too, being thoughtful and open to different perspectives, not just following like sheep a one person set guidance that may not necessarily be correct. So I guess I'm finished there.
Okay, thank you. Thanks both of you for answering those 6 questions. It is now time for our concluding statements. We begin with candidate Keith Wagner. You have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody for putting this on tonight, the League of Women Voters. And I want to thank Catherine too. You'll notice we weren't mean to each other. And I appreciate that. For my part, I'm going to continue to do what I have been doing to represent the district to the best of my ability and to protect our rural culture. In Olympia, I feel like I'm a cultural translator. Seattle may have 4 or 5 senators. You've only got 1 to cover everything from the Whatcom County line all the way down to Skykomish. And think about the task I have explaining some of our issues to those other legislators. And that's why I consider myself a cultural translator. Try explaining to someone from Seattle, our schools are in danger because of elk. I mean, I had money in the last budget to help build fences around the playgrounds up in Concrete, where the kids often can't go outside when they're in school because of the elk. Try explaining that they're eating up our farmers' property and destroying fences and making travel up Highway 20 dangerous for people. They don't get it. They go, wow, you got elk? I want to see an elk. So it's a difficult job to make legislation that I'm interested in relevant and important enough that I can get people to join with me and go forward down there. But I think I've been doing a pretty good job. I think the other side of the aisle doesn't run when they see me coming. I'm considered somebody they can work with and talk to. And I think that's really, really valuable, especially when I am in the minority, and I expect I'll be in the minority a little bit longer. So I'm down there to build bridges, not walls, and to bring good things back to our district, because taxes out of our pocket should come back and do good in our communities. And thank you for the time again.
Thank you, Keith Wagner. Now, candidate Catherine Lewandowski, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Okay, yeah, I would also like to thank you for all the effort and time you've put into the forums, this forum and others, and I do really appreciate it. I just feel like it is very important for us to make it to where regular people who are not beholden to corporations and have not received lots of money and such from some of those corporations get active in our government and can look at one of the things that I think I would bring to the legislature is the nursing process, where we are able to look at what the issues are, look at them closely, look at what our potential solutions are, and then institute those solutions. And more importantly than that is we have to then look at what the results are and not be afraid to say, this isn't working, we need to go another direction. And a lot of times maybe one cure for a certain thing might be, you might have several different cures, and one situation works better in one situation than another. And so you have to be willing to look at what the outcome is and be willing to change direction if it's not going the way it should be going. And I think that that is one thing that I've learned in nursing, is to really look at the big picture, look at all of the needs of the community and the surrounding communities, and try to see and implement solutions and then evaluate those. So, thank you again.
Thank you very much. And thank you to both the candidates, Keith Wagner and Catherine Lewandowski, candidates for State Senate 39th District. This concludes our discussion. We want to acknowledge the City of Sedro-Woolley and Mayor Julia Johnson for their outstanding support. We also would like to provide special recognition to Bill Chambers, Sedro-Woolley's IT director, and his team for their recording and technical assistance of this production. Also, a big thank you to Ed West, our timer, and he's also the vice president of the League of Women Voters of Skagit County. Eric Johnson for his technical support here in our studio. Our studio is in the Reams residence. Thank you to Kathy Ream and her family. And Kathy Ream is the Voter Services Committee Chair for the League of Women Voters in Skagit County. And thank you to Wendy Sanderson, the president of the Skagit League of Women Voters. And thank you to all of you for viewing tonight. We invite you to learn more about these candidates. Look at the Vote 411 website where participating candidates can place information for your convenience. Go to their websites and social media pages. You can find us at our website, www.skagitlwv.org, or find us on Facebook at League of Women Voters of Skagit County. We will repost the links to this on our League website, municipal and community pages. Feel free to send the links to others. Ballots will be mailed by October 16th. Please remember to sign the ballot and put it in a ballot drop box before 8 p.m. on November 3rd. That is Election Day. If using the U.S. mail, remember the postmark is critical. Allow an extra several days for mail service, or again, use a handy Elections Department ballot box, which are located throughout Skagit County. Again, thank you to the candidates for participating. Thank you so much for your willingness to serve our community. We so appreciate it. And again, thank you for being part of this broadcast. Thank you for taking your time to view this broadcast to all of our audience, and please vote and encourage others to do so. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.